Hi and welcome back. In this video, we're going to talk about context managers, and we're going to be developing our own. This is not something that a lot of Python courses get into, so you should feel pretty good that you're getting this deep into the inner workings of Python and how to do some pretty advanced stuff. In the last section, we looked at files, and particularly at a new bit of syntax that said something like this. I'm just going to put it here, and I'm going to delete it in a moment. With something, 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 as something, 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 colon, and then do stuff. And this here was the context manager. And by context, we mean that the current status of the application at the point in which this block runs is modified by this statement and is controlled by that statement. You could even say it's managed by it. And that means that it modifies the status or the context when you go in, and it also modifies it when you go out. That allows you to do some setup when you start and some teardown when you end. We can create our own context managers, and it's reasonably straightforward, so that we can use that syntax for our database connections. We can see, and I've been pretty explicit throughout this section in, for example, copying and pasting code, we can see that we've got a setup and we've got a teardown. And this happens for every function in this file, pretty much, except for this one that doesn't have a commit. So as you can see, there is here a good idea that is using a context manager so that we don't have to get this done every time. Let's create a context manager for our database connections then, so that we don't have to open and close the connection every time. In order to create a context manager, all we have to do is go into our utils package, for example, and create a new Python file, which I'm going to call database connection.py. This database connection is going to import SQLite 3 because it's going to actually connect to the database and it needs SQLite 3 to connect. And it's going to be a class, database connection class. A database connection, in order to be able to be used as a context manager, it of course needs two dunder methods. Remember, dunder methods are the way that everything happens in Python. And if you want to use a with statement, you need two dunder methods. You need enter and you need exit. Notice how the exit method has a few arguments here. We're going to talk about what these are in the next video, so don't worry too much about them right now. Naturally, the enter dunder method is called when you go into the context manager, right before you start running it, and the exit method is executed right when you leave the context manager. When we now have these two methods, we can go over to database.py, we can remove this SQLite 3 import, and instead we can say from database connection, notice how I'm using a relative import here, .database connection, import database connection class. Now, instead of doing this, we can say, or rather, instead of doing this here, we can say with database connection as connection. And then we can just keep this stuff here. Of course, this has to be indented so that they are inside this context manager block. Okay, this is the syntax with database connection. Create a new object of type database connection. As this connection variable, this is the variable we create now so that it can be used inside the context manager. And then we can create a cursor with it. And then we can execute whatever we want. Of course, we could make this database connection return a cursor object, but I think that would be fairly confusing. A database connection probably should return a connection and not a cursor. So, of course, our enter and exit methods don't do anything yet. So this connection variable here is going to contain none. That's what this enter method returns. Pass just means do nothing. All functions, all methods in Python return none by default. So this connection variable will be none. We don't want to do that. Of course, here we are also creating a new object. Therefore, if we want, not necessary, but if we want, we can also have an init method here. This init method is going to be called first when we initialize this object, and then the enter method is going to be called as we go into the context manager, and the exit method is going to be called as we leave the context manager. Of course, we have to initialize the connection. We have to do this SQLite3.connect. So let's do it. I think we should do this SQLite3.connect in here in the enter method. So we can return SQLite3.connect data.db. Now, when we go back to database.py, this connection variable is now a SQLite3 connect result. It is the result of whatever the enter method returned. So that's correct. Now, this will all work, but when we go to the end, we've not yet added any code to commit and close the connection. So we have to do that in here in the exit method. Now, we don't have access to this connection inside this class. There's no way to access the connection that we've got, and it's not passed to us as a parameter. So what to do is use this init method to say self.connection is none. Then we're going to say self.connection is this connection here, return self.connection. Now we're doing the same thing, but we've defined a new property of our database connection class that is going to store the SQLite3.connect result. The enter method is going to return that, which means it's usable from our database.py, and now we have access to it here in our exit method as well as self.connection. So we can do self.connection.commit and self.connection.close. There are some instances where we won't need to commit, but it's okay to leave that there even when we don't need to. SQLite will just not do anything if we call commit, but there's nothing to commit, no changes made to the database, so this is fine. Okay, I would improve this by also saying self.host equal host and pass this in here as a parameter to the init method, and instead of data.db, use self.host. That way, when we go back to our database.py, we can say data.db in here, and that makes things a bit more explicit. We can see that we're now connecting to a database called data.db. We're getting the connection here. Presumably, everything is being handled, including closing the connection and everything like that. This looks pretty similar to with open books.txt in read mode as file. As you can see, the open here is a class as well. It's creating a new object of type open, and it's getting two parameters to the init method. And then the enter function inside this class is returning a file, which we're using as this variable here. Very much the same. Of course, this has another argument there, but that's fine. What we've done is we've created a new object and we've given it what we want to do with that object, connect to database.db, and that is going to handle everything for us. This with statement is a very Pythonic way of writing code. It's not something that other programming languages have, and I really encourage you to use it. Now that we've got it, of course, we can copy it and use it on all of our functions. In the add book, we do exactly the same thing. Notice how this context manager is going to commit at the end as well, so nothing to do here. Also here, we can, of course, do all of this. We don't have to close the connection, and we can return books either inside or outside the context manager. It's up to you, it doesn't matter. But I'm going to leave it outside just for kicks. And then we can do it here as well, of course. And we can, of course, also do it here. Now, this code is made much simpler. None of this code has to deal with connecting to a database, or committing, or closing the connection. All of that is done for us with this context manager. And that means that if we were to forget to commit or close or something, now we can no longer forget, because as soon as we do this, everything is handled for us. You could try to make another context manager which generates the cursor, and then use a single context manager for both. You can try that if you want, play around with it, and see what you come up with if that's something that interests you. Context managers are really exciting, and it's quite cool to work with them and really finally understand what's going on behind the scenes. And with almost everything in Python, what's going on is that some dunder method is getting called. Okay? And when you do with, The init method gets called first for the object you're initializing, then the enter method, and finally the exit method at the end. In the next video, we're going to look at these three things here, so don't go anywhere, and I'll see you on the next video.